Well, former ANC MP and African Democratic Change leader Makhosi Khoza is retiring from politics. Khoza says she has opportunities outside of politics. In a Facebook post, she's thanked those who helped her during her political journey. For more on this, we're joined on the line by political analyst Sanusha Naidu. Well, Sanusha, good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. Makhosi Khoza's being a bit vague about why she's leaving politics and the opportunities that she could be referring to, but what could her possible motive be for retiring?
Good afternoon to you. It's difficult to say. I think it's also the question of whether or not she feels that perhaps it's time to move on. And this is the context within which you find that, politics is a long, drawn-out game, and so the continuous battles that you have to fight and the continuous activities you have to undertake can actually become quite a toll on you as an individual. And I think in terms of Makhosi herself, she was quite a firebrand in the ANC in Parliament, being very, very critical and outspoken about the levels of state capture and questions around particular issues of accountability and the executive. So obviously, there's this expectation. She left the ANC. She formed her own political party. There was contestation in that newly formed party as well. And then, of course, now she says she has to move on to other things. But this is the challenge, I think, for most people who leave a political organization or political party. We've seen this in the context of Mampela Rampele, where things start to go pear-shaped for them, or maybe perhaps the ability to continue the kinds of activities they want to continue becomes constrained. So it's a long, drawn-out process. Whether or not the reason she gives is something we'll only be able to ask her, and she'll be able to give us the reasons. We can't speculate, but definitely I think that in terms of this going forward, just in terms of before the election next year, it does pose certain challenges for her, that political party that she formed.
We've seen a slew of smaller political parties being started often as breakaways. COPE, AHANG, the NFP, African Democratic Change, struggling to be successful and particularly struggling with leadership issues. Why is that?
Well, I think in the context of South Africa, because of the multi-party dynamic of our political landscape, you have a whole host of parties that form for the reasons you've given, as well as for the fact that they can contest elections perhaps at the provincial and local level. But here's the challenge for them is sustainability. And I think what we're seeing in the South African context is that sustainability for political parties become critical in the context of whether or not they perform really well at the polls, or because of internal struggles or internal questions of leadership and governance. And more importantly, I think, when do they become relevant? So if they are contesting at the national level, it's quite a big pool, and it's quite a contested pool. Once at the provincial level, they find some level of relevance. But we saw in the 2016 election, for example, where the smaller political parties became kingmakers. And being kingmakers, they can then start to develop coalitions. But we're seeing these coalitions also be unraveling. For example, in Nelson Mandela Bay with the DA, I think, and also in parts of the Western Cape at the branch level, at the the by-election level, and so forth. And so this is where I think the question of how political parties sustain themselves become a question of whether or not they're in there for the long term, or whether or not it is a reaction to something more short-term, but there are medium to long-term implications of sustainability.
Is there a way that African Democratic Change could survive without Makhosi Khoza?
That links to the question about challenges of smaller political parties. It's built around a particular personality. So I think when you build a party around a particular personality, if that personality starts to move on, or there's some issues that personality brings to the party, which then challenges the authenticity of the party or the governance of the party, we see the party start to go through its own internal contradictions. And I think there's a number of examples in South Africa. The question is, beyond Makhosi Khoza, do we know who else is in that party to take it forward? And I think that's the bigger question in terms of connecting to the electorate and connecting with their base. And we've seen this. I can give you the example of the Minority Front in KZN, where after the death of its leader and founder, Amichan Rajbansi, there was a number of internal contradictions, power struggles, fighting about who should have control of the party. And the question then becomes is what happens to the relevance of the party when the leader or when the personality is no longer there. So if trends are to be looked at in South Africa, I'm not sure whether this party would be able to survive, but it could be possible that they remain relevant at a very local level.
That was political analyst Sanusha Naidu about Makhosi Khoza's decision to leave politics.